What's this?
We're prepared.
Just in case.
Okay.
And I keep tracks, more than 3 pages, I know that there is, so thank you.
And it's a brand new pen. Okay, let me just sit in this feeling for a moment.
Okay, I think we are live, right? Yeah. Okay. Give you guys a minute to get all your stuff together.
I apologize. We had a blanket exercise earlier today, so my thoughts are just being a little scattered here for the moment. I'm good, thank you.
You're good?
Thank you for your
Okay.
patience.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I am going to call the meeting to order at 6:59 p.m. And we'll get started out just I'm going to read our territorial acknowledgement actually. So the town of Colehurst is located in traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. We honor the Blackfoot people and their traditional ways of knowing and caring for this land, as well as all Indigenous peoples who have helped shape and continue to strengthen our community. And then we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. So you will see the agenda as circulated. We are going to just bump something around a little bit here. So we're going to take reports from staff, so the CAO appointment, and just put that right after the adoption of the agenda, if that works for everybody. So then can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Great, can you read our motion?
I move that the council adopt the agenda for the October 4th, 2022 regular meeting of council as amended, moving section E1 into the top of the list.
Thank you. Any discussion? Go ahead.
Can we add citizens without formal notice as well?
Yeah, we can do that. What if we put that here? So we're gonna do a little bit of a rework here, if that's okay. So can we do that after we approve the minutes? So we'll go and we'll do the CAO appointment, the minutes, and then we'll do the citizens without formal notice. All right. Any more discussion? All in favor? That's carried, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move right on to the appointment of the CAO. So I'd like to move that council appoints Jeffrey Kaufman as interim chief administrative officer for the town of Colehurst in accordance with the CAO bylaw number 32607, and that council thank Mike Passy for his time of service as acting CAO. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, so now let's move on and we're going to just approve the minutes. We do have 2 minutes here, and so can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Are we doing them together or independently?
We can do them together, if that works.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Great. Can you read them?
Well, I do have 2 separate ones before me.
Sure, you can do them. Let's do them separate if you
So I'll
like.
make the motion, the council accept the minutes from the September 6, 2022 regular meeting of council.
Great. Any discussion? No question, all in favor? That's carried, thank you. And then, would somebody like to make the motion for the special meeting?
I can do that.
Great.
I move that council accepts the minutes from the September 21st, 2022 special meeting of council.
Any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, so now we'll move on to our citizens without formal notice, and you're welcome to come and join us.
Well, we'll just be quick.
Okay.
I just was hoping, actually, let me speak. I was just hoping that the council consider not raising the natural gas franchise tax. Funds generated by a tax are only used to maintain the gas infrastructure. It's basically added to the town's operating funds. Utility bills already have the carbon tax and the franchise tax. And then we get the GST on top of those 2 taxes. And that's kind of weird that you have a tax on a tax, I think, but, I mean, if you want to generate extra funds, I think that you should probably do it by mill rate, so that we like extra cash, don't put it on the utility bill, put it on the mill rate, and then there's no GST on property tax. So you don't actually get taxed twice, and it's a fair amount. And you don't have to give old Trudeau some extra cash. Anyway, you know, I mean, just because every other municipality does it, doesn't mean that you should do it. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we'll just carry on then with our agenda, if that works for everybody. Okay, so the first one that we have here is the EOEP strategic planning works. And this was something that we had talked about. Would somebody like to make the motion that is presented here?
I can do that.
Great, can you read that please?
I move that council approves Councilor Scott Arguments and Councilor Deb Florence to attend the EOEP strategic plan course.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. All right, and now we're going to be moving into closed session. Thank you, have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Would somebody like to make a motion that we go into closed session at 7:04?
I move that we move the meeting into an in-camera session. Oh, order, do I read the things? Jeff, do I read the items off, sorry, see you again?
No, not at this time. You can
Okay.
do that at the end of the meeting. It's to the purpose of the closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you.
Stop going live for closed session. We wouldn't be the first.
I think it just ends the, yeah, I think it's just will end, you don't come back on or try to restream if we close it, or they just pause it.
They mute it and then close the microphone.
closed meeting discussion with respect to all this list,
Yes.
we would get rid of council committees from there, or would we leave that on?
Yes, actually, we can move that from closed session to public session.
Okay,
I recognize that the agenda has already been approved, but the desired council is actually have a public conversation about this.
okay. Are we back on live?
Yes.
Okay. I will make this motion.
Okay.
That council direct the closed meeting discussions with respect to the CAO update, with FOIP section 24.1, land development, FOIP section 16.1, council objectives, FOIP section 24.1, and that these remain confidential pursuant to section 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried, thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna move into the council committee discussion, just to start looking at that. And so I'm just going to open it up to everybody. We went away and had a little bit of time to think about our committees, and in terms of what we'd like those to look like this year to help advance our strategic plan. And so I will just open up the floor to anyone who would like to say something.
I think it's typically between Deb and I who wants to go first. And so the conversation tonight is what value do we see in these committees, and do we see some that might be better suited to be combined committees, or are there some committees that just may not serve us any longer?
Yes, or even potential of new committees that maybe we need to form in place of others.
Okay, thank you.
I think that one of the things that we did here was that we do need to have the agenda setting committee be established. So just a question for this then. Obviously at this point in time, we don't have terms of reference for these. These are things that we would develop after the fact.
Yes.
How about if we get started, maybe I'll just go through the committees here that we currently have. And then we can just have some discussion on that. So the first one that we have is the Committee of the Whole. Is there any thoughts on this one, if we should continue, not?
I think that that's probably an important one to continue with.
Anyone disagree with that? No? Okay.
Can I ask, do you meet for every cow, or is it just when items of interest to council arise?
It's been I think that we've only missed a couple and they were in the summertime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And who does the agenda setting for that?
That was done by administration.
I think it was a combination. There are sometimes we would have discussions in council and something needed a little more attention, and we would then request it be moved to. So there were times when we put forward suggestions, but primarily it was brought forward by administration.
I would agree with that, yeah, like it would be something that's kind of brought up. I think that in the past they have been a little bit, sometimes they've been morning sessions, but oftentimes they've been more information sharing or presentation style. Any further discussion on Committee of the Whole? All right, that one shall remain. Okay, so then the next one that we have here that we have in our package is the Risk Management Committee.
I think the risk management committee is pretty operational. I think that it is, I mean, if we could, I think that we need risk management. Perhaps we could have a risk management attached to a policy bylaw committee so that we can use sort of that lens of risk management when we're looking over our policies. But it needs to be brought up much more of an umbrella type of a committee. And in all honesty, I have no idea what that would really look like, but I do know that inspecting roads and things is just not what we should be doing. My belief.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
I agree with what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. And further to that, I think that when we talk about our past practices, it's something that we haven't actively met for, right? And so knowing that, I think that this one could be one that could lead.
I agree.
You agree?
I agree.
Okay.
Can I ask who currently serves on that committee?
Hopefully I don't even know.
We've met once.
Great, okay, so if we're all in agreement with that, we will remove that committee, but
So
look
do
at a
we
different way.
remove it or should we revise it to have sort of more of an oversight or an overview? I kind of, one of the things that I loved in the past, when I sat on policy bylaw, I also sat on risk management, and the pieces that I really enjoyed was sort of that oversight. So we're looking at with the lens of risk management. And so we would have been addressing things like what are potential liabilities, right? Those kinds of things, right? And so if we can revise it to have more of a,
Like a good governance.
yeah, oversight, yeah.
Would that not be the work of like a policy or something that's brought to the full council at that point? Or is it something that you see that like a smaller group would have to look at?
You know, I suspect that it could be the work, well, it is the work of council, always looking at risk management would be the work of council. But we haven't, and maybe that's what we do, we roll it in as part of our regular practice, because we haven't been very good at it, I'm gonna say. Right, that kind of overarching oversight.
Can I ask how you've seen other municipalities deal with this? Like, I know that, Director of Public Works came in and he presented us with this great big spreadsheet of all this risk management stuff. So knowing that it's being very well cared for, by staff, but how do other councils really look at this from the governance perspective, I suppose?
Well, from the governance perspective, it's about embracing your role as the board of directors of the organization. And so from that perspective, risk management includes things like the municipality's susceptibility to an external attack, digital attack through computer system structures. It can be looking at insurance policies. Are we actually doing what we should be doing in terms of search policies? Not on the operational side, but on the governance side of that. Risk management can also act in an audit capacity. So you can actually, if you had a committee who could sit with the auditor, go through the audit as a committee to hear both the public and perhaps any in-camera conferences or closed session conferences about the budget, bring that information back to council as well. So this idea of risk management does have a policy overview. If you have a member of Public Works who brings a concern or an issue or shows you something, do we need a bylaw on that? Do we need a policy governing that? Again, thinking about the why and the what, and then it's up to the operations to consider the how, to make it so, to implement it. So there is definitely a governance role in risk management. And I would tend to agree with the assessment that what you have here is incredibly hands-on, it's very operational. This is 2003, and I think your community has grown a little bit in almost 20 years. And so council's role, from what I understand from you, council wants to embrace its role as governors and to make those policy observations, policy recommendations. So transitioning risk management to more of an oversight from the governance, from the policy, from the bylaw, from the review side, to ensure that processes and practices are being undertaken properly. Absolutely.
Like in hearing that, for me, it makes a lot of sense, I think, to keep this. Maybe it doesn't mean monthly or it's on a different schedule, but it is things like that, like you're talking about with the budget or with any of those things that maybe we do need to review annually or whatever that might be. But I do think that the terms of reference needs to be updated a lot.
I think we scrap them and start over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was intuiting what we needed, I just didn't really have the language around it, so thank you for that.
Sorry, I thought I repeated exactly what you said.
Well, you're very good at making me sound good then, thank you.
Would anyone disagree with that? No? Councilor Peltry, are you okay with that?
I don't know. I guess when we're looking at risks, yeah. It seems broad. If the risk is it an emergency risk, or could it go to an emergency committee, or if it's a natural risk in terms of insurance, could it go to a finance committee, right? So that's kind of where I'm thinking is that I don't know if it serves its own committee, or if this is just how do you assign that? I guess is what I'm wondering. So
That's a really actually a good point, and possibly every committee should have that as a component, is risk management of their own committee, right, as an oversight. Is there, do you think there's anything within this that you see that we may not already be doing or within a committee? That we- The risk management oversight piece.
I think that there's, the more I think about this, I think that there's a lot of value in it. One of the things that I used to do at an organization that I was on the board for is that we did what we called direct inspections at that point. And it was very much related to, it was looking at the insurance policy to make sure that it was active. Like it was stuff like that. So it wasn't so much like diving into so much into the operation, but it was that high level type of thing. Even if we're talking about, with the auditors and having this committee kind of look at that more and talk to them more about some of those potential risks that might be associated with that liability. Yeah.
So certification.
So I think there is a purpose. I think that we need to really look at what are those touch points and where does this fit? Because the thing I like about this too is that it's coming from that very much that direct lens of risk management. I think that we could put it off to committees to say you need to do this, but you're looking at that from a different lens probably at that point in time too. Because if you're on the rec and culture committee, you're thinking about rec and culture, but you're not necessarily always assessing the risk. Maybe you are, but it's not your primary lens, I guess, is my thought on that.
Who currently serves on that, sorry? Oh, yes, we got that already. Okay. And you've only met once?
Did I convince you?
No.
Building consensus in a democracy.
It's true. With this then, should we put it to a vote to see if we want to continue with this committee?
Well, I think that we've all identified that there's a need to have some sort of risk management, just not at this level, right? So more at the governance level. So what speaks to me the most is what you were saying, Deputy Mayor Caldwell, about that, putting the two committees together, the risk management and the policy bylaw, and really just trying to go high level with them and try to make them more of an overall governance thing, as opposed to getting into some of the operational stuff and into the admin stuff, and then maybe putting those together and kind of looking at it that way.
That makes sense to me.
Mhm.
I like that.
Okay, so does that make sense then if we combine those two
Absolutely.
into a new name that takes care of all of those things? Risk management and policy bylaw?
I think that works really well. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're gonna combine. Moving on, we've got the Economic Development Committee, which I don't know if has this committee been,
Nobody
active?
signed to it.
Okay,
No one signed.
and I know that this was something that we have talked about within the strategic plan about being important to us. I don't know if this necessarily in its current iteration meets our needs, but I do think that there is potential value in having something like this.
Do you think that it would work well though with the Community Sustainability Enhancement Committee? Or do you think those are two very different things?
I'm gonna let Councillor Ackerman speak to this.
Thank you, Mayor. I do think that you could probably combine those two committees, because if you're looking at sustainability and enhancement, that's talking about supporting your community and providing opportunities for them to move forward. And I think that's pretty much what economic development would be within the community. I think that if the committee was a little bit more broad, it would give a little bit more flexibility on what you have to do, because I don't think necessarily economic development would be like a once a month thing. You're probably gonna have ideas and topics that you're gonna be discussing and trying to move forward, but there's gonna be other ways that you can support the community and make sure that the community is sustainable at the same time. So it might be more of that bigger picture versus just focusing on businesses. So I do believe that we should be doing something for economic development within our community, especially with the plans of expansion. And I do see that if we combine that with the sustainability enhancement committee, or even just kind of merge them into a new one, I think that would be beneficial overall.
So just to clarify, you're saying that we should stick them together? Yeah, great. Councilor Lawrence?
I think that with the Economic Development Committee, I think that it's kind of, well, first of all, I agree with you that in its current iteration, it's not good because it's even talking about having Community Futures Lethbridge region representatives. But I think that we have a really good RETA in our area, that's South Grove, and I think we already have an external board that does some of this economic development stuff, and maybe it could be a little bit more active. I actually don't see this going well with community sustainability and enhancement because I see community sustainability and enhancement more about like beautification and what's working, or how can we best support communities. I would actually say that one would be best funded with the park and recs or the rec and culture, whatever. And I would say this one can go, as we already have a South Grove in our area. We have strong representation on it, and I'm not sure if this is beneficial.
If we think though that we have a potential for a new commercial area, moving into our community, and I think we have a huge amount of sort of these just quiet businesses that are in their homes. And, we did do a bit of a survey in the past with them, and they were looking for opportunities to become more visible, right? And maybe we do another survey again. You had asked about that, Councillor Ackerman, and maybe that is something that we look at as we look at providing greater support to our businesses and possibly getting them to grow out of their homes and into our new area. Look at sort of incentives, and I'm not sure there's a whole list of ways that you can really, strategies to grow your business and to maintain them. So it might be something that's important coming up to us, that we don't feel is absolutely important in this moment, but certainly developing it and growing it might be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you touched on some very important points when you talk about, giving businesses a voice and community stakeholder engagement. And what that automatically points me towards is the Chamber of Commerce or like a business, because I do think we're lacking in that representation. And that's something that, just on the side, that I'm trying to get people excited about, and hopefully, we get a community to start their group. And I think that that's where that would fit in really well, is that chamber type of group and things like that. So I agree with you. I guess maybe I'm just unsure of how to do this at the council level, without it being South Grove or without it being a Chamber of Commerce.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I just looked over to what another town is, what their economic development committee does. They've reviewed, provide recommendations on policies, economic development policies. They can recommend programs and strategic outcomes and goals, and they review the strategic plan and on an annual basis review policies for that. So it's not solely focused on. It does, yeah, it's a little different perhaps than a chamber, but not all. It seems like not a lot of towns have them. Like, it depends on the town. Yeah.
If this is a relatively new stage for us as a community, growing a commercial zone, it might not be a bad idea to approach it with intention, right? And if we have this committee in place, we can we want another committee looking at our policies just with the lens of, is this business friendly? Right? How many committees do we want looking at our policies? But I think there's important work to be done in terms of sort of that whole community readiness for this, and enticing these businesses in. And are we friendly for business, right?
Yeah, and I just think like one of our goals was to incentivize business development holders, right? So with one committee, I think we should have these goals as a priority as the license committees, right? So one maybe this committee that's looking after different ones, but it would be nice to have one committee that could potentially support that a bit stronger for the business side of it, right? So so maybe economic development is too broad, I don't know.
Other thoughts? I would agree with what you're saying. I think that this is something that we've identified as being important. I, at this point in time, don't know exactly what this could look like for us, but I think that it's something that we need to invest in, particularly with what you're saying, with having, attracting new businesses, or like, I know even in some of our conversations, we had heard that staff was being approached by some businesses that were interested in coming to our community and, not really knowing even, I guess, what was available or how to support them or anything, and looking at all of our stuff to see if, like you're saying, are we friendly to bringing people in. So my thought, I guess, is that we keep it, we just redefine what it means. Would anyone disagree with that? Good, okay, we're keeping that one. Okay, so the next one is the Community Sustainability Enhancement Committee. So Councillor Ackermans and I have been part of this committee this past year, and I think we've only really met twice. I really, myself, don't understand necessarily the purpose of this committee in its current iteration. I kind of felt like it kind of became a catch-all for things that didn't belong anywhere else. And so I don't know, and we only met twice, so I don't think it really actually helped us achieve anything in moving things forward. Would anyone disagree with that? So, and you've been around a little longer, so you would know a little more about the history of this committee, but that was my experience this past year.
And you were right, actually. I think it was developed as a bit of a catch-all because there were times when, you were going to initiate first conversations with developers. Or there was an organization that was having a challenge in the community and was looking for some kind of additional support. So it became sort of this catch-all for all kinds of things. And I'll be frank, it was a little bit of a bane of my existence because it was two members of council that were making actually on the ground decisions, which really isn't the way it's supposed to, and then bringing the information to us after the fact. And so in its current terms of reference, it kind of sets them up to be able to do those kinds of things. And so I would agree that this one doesn't make very much sense.
So my thought is, my recommendation is that we get rid of this committee. And then, just a question, it's my understanding that we can create committees at any point in time. Is that correct or is that incorrect?
I don't believe that you, I'm gonna have to get clarification on
Okay.
that, because I haven't seen a bylaw that establishes a process for that, or a policy that
Okay.
establishes a process for that. But this would actually be something we could do at the 18th, or possibly on the 1st, if there's a requirement to actually establish a decommissioning committee.
Okay, yeah, because I think that's one of the things, like, as we go along, like, maybe we'll realize we need something, but we just don't know what it is right now.
If I can speak to this particular one, if members of council look under purpose, to develop, coordinate, support, and identify the trends and needs of town facilities and staffing, that should be the responsibility of the CAO and the organization, and then provide that information to council for your value and your direction. We respond to your direction. Number two, to be representative and responsive to the needs of community organizations. That's both council and the organization. When we get into those issues of budgeting, the issues of requirement or need in the community, that's more of a council decision, but it's a value and it's led based on budget conversations and need from council. So that's the entirety of council as opposed to a committee. To work to ensure the community remains welcoming and inclusive in infrastructure and activities, that's responsibility of all of us. I think that's a value that this council has demonstrated, and it's important that staff understand and recognize in the service that we provide that everybody is treated certainly with respect and an inclusivity, recognizing the differential need of some individuals does require more attention or service, and responding accordingly. And then finally, to make requests to other committees with regard to further consideration of certain items within their discretion. Well, again, that's usually council direction. Either to each other or through the CAO. So the purpose of this committee, in my humble assessment, is actually being taken care of through normal operations, or should be certainly number one be dealt with through normal operations, and 2, 3, or 4 is the work of both council and the organization independently and collectively.
That's great, thank you. So, are we in agreement that this is a committee that we can get rid of? Yes,
Can I make that motion?
sure can.
Can I take that paper out in the back first?
So the next one that we have is the Recreation and Culture Committee. And I guess that with this committee, I'd just love to hear from everybody on your thoughts on this one. This one has definitely evolved to be much more of a working committee and an operational committee in a lot of regards. Go ahead.
So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it has very much evolved into a working committee, which is exactly where we don't want to be as, you know, as a council. We want to be governing. Yeah. So I think that also when we talk about, and what we talked about last week too, with, you know, upping our staff complement and getting the right people in places, there's no other position that has a committee attached to it. So I actually think it would be really taking us to the weeds if we would keep this committee and we plan to have a staff on it. And kind of like some of the comments we've been speaking about. So just echoing that a little bit is it's kind of just what we're supposed to be doing anyway. So if we want to have rec and we're going to hire a person, there should be no reason to have this committee. And then of course, I know I get the intent of it because there was nothing, but I think that it's evolved into a very much operational thing. And we've seen that that's not super productive and it's not sustainable. And so I would like to see it, I would like to see it be a staff position on committee.
So I just have a question. As I've been looking at other communities, I've noticed that they often they'll use the term like committee and board. So I'll see there's a rec board. What is the difference between why do they do that?
Some situations it can be colloquial, and some situations it can be legislated. So a library
Okay.
board is legislated under the Library Act. I think that's probably the biggest in your experience,
So
Mike.
I've seen where it is an external board.
Yes, yeah,
I think it's.
it's the
one of
same
those-
thing.
It's, this is the council, it's listed in the council of board of directors, of the business world as board of directors. Here it's council, just,
Okay,
I think terminology for one, but I think, in my mind, I think FCSS board,
yes,
which is not can be, but is not always a municipal council board. It's a separate board. Maybe it has council members on it as an external thing, but it's,
I think that the one that I was looking at, I think it was the town of Tabor, and they refer to their, I believe it was a committee, but they refer to it as their recreation board. And so that's why I was wondering if there's a difference between internally, if there's a difference between a committee or a board. Because to me, it looked like it was very much an internal committee. Just to speak to this, my thought on this is I think that there is a need for a high level governance with recreation, but not in the way that it has been happening. I like the idea of having a community input into what recreation looks like, but more from that policy and that where are we going with this, but not actually be the people that are the boots on the ground delivering the events. Is my thought on this. And so I would like to see a version of this. Maybe it's not called this. Maybe it's the rec board. Maybe it's something different. I don't know. But I think that there is still value in something like this. It just needs to be reworked quite a bit. Other thoughts?
Sorry, can I just,
I agree with you. I think we've gone into the weeds a little bit with this one because we didn't have a staff position. And so it did become a working committee, which was, it was just not really what we should have been doing. But again, you do what you need to do and you don't have the resources to get the job done, right?
Absolutely. Councilor Florence?
no, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your comments about, what parts, I guess, do you still see there being value in, specifically with this committee? Because I'm just having a little bit of trouble wrapping my mind about it. I was wondering if you could just unpack that a little bit more.
Sure. Would you like to go first?
Sure,
Go ahead.
well, so I think there's gotta be, I think the idea, well, for me at least anyway, is having a point where community groups can touch off with and connect with, right? So, is there, do we want them to come to council meetings? Do we want to discuss color? It's a community group's proposal for an event, right? So I think the committee could be empowered to make those decisions. You know, should there be a, you know, should we have Canada Day celebration or not? Should we have a Alberta Day celebration or not? Like what days are we gonna have events on potentially, could be something that they look at. And then they could also invite community groups to make submissions and review those. Make recommendations to the capital budget for even, culture and parks upgrades. So into the future, right? So.
I guess that I would kind of echo what he's saying in terms of like, I think that this is just an opportunity for community to provide their voices to, like we're looking at that rec master plan, or we're looking at, one of the other things I was just looking at, again, town of Taber. Like part of this group too was also looking at the culture aspect of it, in a sense of, like if there was a memorial garden. So it is a very wide scope in a lot of ways where they're looking at a lot of different things. Like in Taber, they've got the Arts and Heritage Committee. So maybe it's a split, but I think that there's a lot of value in that because like say we want to do something with public art, or we wanted to do, I don't know, something like that, right? To kind of look at that and look at that enhancement of the community in those ways and getting those recommendations or diving into that a little bit more so.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I appreciate those comments, and I would agree, especially with what you were saying at the beginning. However, again, I'm not sure if council should be deciding on which days to celebrate. I think that again is more of a staff thing to bring forward, right, and not really be getting into the weeds about it. So I guess, and that's where I think this is coming from too, right? It's just kind of trying to stay in that area of governance, and that's where it's coming from. But I agree because I think that arts and heritage thing is an important aspect as well. So I would be okay keeping it. I just would like to see it be different and be high level, which I think we're all on the same page about.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just looking at the pillars that we have in our strategic plan, one of them is deep cultural and social connections. So I'm almost wondering if this could be a committee almost of like community liaisons that might be able to reach out and kind of interact with the community and kind of take their feedback and help bring it to the governance level so that we can stay in touch. I guess that's just what I'm thinking. It's just kind of more of an in between, so people have a group where they can be heard with a little more time than to say like a 5-minute speech at the beginning of the council meeting. If they want to have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation about something in the community.
I wonder, like in my thought on that is, I think that might be something different. I think there's a lot of different things that are happening within this and within that. Like I think that recreation is one thing, right? Parks, recreation, that's kind of its own entity in some ways. Culture, I think, is its own type of thing. Like heritage culture, whatever you want to call that, I think that's kind of its own little
Events,
blurb
community
too,
events.
or whatever that is, right? I even think that like community events, I think that if we had appropriate staffing, a lot of that, as long as there's policy in place, could be run through the staff and they can approve those things. We really don't need to be approving someone's $1,500 event thing that they want to do, as long as there was a staff that was associated with that program. But I think that like, and yeah, the heritage and the culture like might do more of that, like you're talking about with events, but at more of that higher level, they're not actually engaging in that unless they want to be an outside volunteer that is participating in it. But that would be the role of the committee. And then I think what you're kind of saying too is more of that community engagement lens of like, how do we get feelers into the community? So I actually think that those are three very distinct things that I think we're trying to wrap up into one gigantic ball.
Yeah, and I'll just speak, I agree with what you're saying is the goal was to get out of operations. The goal of that committee was to get out of doing hands-on work. And the hope was to have sort of an FCSS representative on that committee as well. And bring in, the different organizations that provide those kinds of supports for our community. And take it into a higher level governance committee. So if we did have staff that were able to support, initiatives moving forward, it would allow us to really embrace these pieces of our strategic plan and start to move them forward, right?
Like what I would really love to see is if there was the rec board, the rec whatever, that's focused more so on like that rec master plan or like those higher level things. Like we talked a lot about like, do we want to have like, what is this gonna look like for our community, right? And having more of that input into that. And then having one that's more about like culture and history, because we do know that there's a lot of history and a lot of stuff here that's not necessarily been, we haven't done anything with that necessarily. And then the whole culture component, I think, is a big piece of that as well. And then if we wanted to delve into that community engagement type of thing, but I really think that rec and culture / heritage need to be split.
I agree with that.
Any thoughts on my proposal?
I mean, I guess there are some overlaps. So, and I guess the question is there enough work? I suppose we probably want to make more work. but is the feedback that we're going to get from one group of people, like if we need 3 citizens for this and 3 citizens for that, is it going to be is it a target group? Is the target going to be much different, I guess?
I could see it being different, because I could see somebody like with recreation looking at more so from like the like facilities, the like that, like the sporting, whatever, all that type of stuff. Whereas the culture and the history or the heritage would be somebody that I would think that like some sort of, or like I see them as kind of like 2 kind of different individuals that might be attracted to either. But again, I guess a question for you too is that like a lot of the stuff that historically this group has done or would be involved in, of what I'm thinking, might be considered operational. Because some of this stuff would be, just like an example, with like the history component, we had this walking tour around town that a group of volunteers have kind of put together and done. It hasn't really necessarily been promoted beyond that one-time type of thing, but it is available. And so is that something that would fall under the operations category? Would that be something that this committee group would do, or is that something different?
That's a great question, Your Worship. Given the structure of what I'm looking at for this committee, its purpose, its objectives, the membership of it, the municipality can do anything council instructs it to do. There is a cost, as always, but it can provide the service that you need. When you're considering creating community and building community, there need to be those conversations, those considerations about what is it that we do, what is it we have to do as an organization, what is it we want to do as an organization, what is it the community can do to provide that support or service. Having a volunteer group provide that historic tour is a great way of providing something to the community that the municipality doesn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So there is certainly a savings, operational, human resource, financial savings to doing that. But if that's something that you want to codify, it's something that you want the municipality to do, it can be done.
Yeah.
So it really comes back to council's value decision. Is that what you're looking for? Is that the direction that you want to head? Do you want the municipality to be the steward of recreation, culture, and heritage in the community? Do you want the municipality to be a partner with recreation, culture, and heritage in the community? Do you want the municipality to be an overseer of it, that others deliver the service, or do you want the municipality to stand back? Those are your options. Those are the decisions council can have, or the decisions that council can make. It's really a perspective of value and how you see the community organized, its culture, its history, its traditions, how people respond in course.
So I guess my thought on that is that like I love this idea of having committees where you can get our community involved in. Governance type of committees are great for some people, but these type of committees I think really build community, and it also provides people with an outlet to have their say in things too, right, and to be part of something. And so that's where like I see a lot of value in having a culture committee or a heritage committee or whatever it is, where like I know that one of our, because I was on this committee before, that one of our residents at one point that talked a lot about the Indigenous history that we have here that we've really not done anything with or recorded. And so while I think we could leave that to others to potentially do, I do think we're missing out on a lot of things that's there, that we're just not leading, and nobody else is, I guess, at this point either in a lot of ways.
I think it comes down to like actually, like, coming on to your ideas, I think too. Because of that, actually, truth and reconciliation part of it, and the cultural committee that can be part of their mandate. And I think that you're right, like, we want to be a welcoming and inclusive community. And so by having this, like, this cultural community, it kind of hits that nail on the head a little bit more direct than a recreation and culture.
I would say so. I think it gives some more purpose behind just that one piece.
And so would that be some of the mandate is to embrace some of the reconciliation or work towards embracing some of the.
Well, I think that would be great in a lot of ways. I know at one point we had kind of talked about it would be really nice to work with an elder to help us create our own land acknowledgement statement and to look at those different types of things that we could potentially incorporate amongst the community. I mean, like even in terms of
calls to actions.
yeah, the different calls to action. And I know even like when it was Ukraine's Independence Day, right? Like things like that where it's just these small little gestures or things that we're doing to make it more visible in the community is having that larger effect. And so while I wouldn't say that that's necessarily governance related, I do see value in it. I just want to make sure that that's an appropriate move for like a council committee, I guess is what I'm asking.
You mean in terms of having a counselor on the committee?
Yeah, or just to speak like one of our internal committees, like is this, because before it was so much of a working committee where we were doing all the work, does it make sense for us to be having something like what I'm proposing?
To be community led,
Yes.
so to speak?
Yes, but I guess it would reside with us in some ways.
Well, it comes down to how you want to structure it. Is this a committee that can propose and initiate and go out and do, which means there might need to be a funding component to it, just give them a budget and then they operate within the budget. Is it a committee that brings recommendations to council and council makes a decision based on that? And that might go back to your, do we celebrate Alberta Day? Do we celebrate Canada Day? what's the strategy there? You then have to take that step back to the why and the what for council. And is that what we really want to be deciding? Is that what we want to be doing? It comes down to how you see that structured or how council wants to see that structured. Is it something you want to just hand to the community and go, we'll call it a committee of council, but it's really community driven. We will appoint the volunteers, we'll provide some funding, but work towards enhancing the cultural life, the historic life if you want of the Culvers. Or if you want a member or two members of council serving on it, helping to do that. And then he or she they become a liaison back to council to provide the feedback. It's really on how council wants to envision the relationship with the organization.
And I think, this is one of the things that I actually think we've kind of done well, because we don't have a lot of those people stepping up in our community. We're a community of commuters. And so really developing those leaders within our community. We have success in some areas and we don't, like we've had a tremendously successful Miners Days committee for many, many years, but then people just start to become tired and we don't get those new people stepping up and coming on board, right? And so we sort of made that decision that if we could have these kinds of, they're sort of a bit of a hybrid. So primarily they are community committees, but they do have representation of council on. So we don't take leadership role within it, but we're there. We act as liaison, but we also act as sort of communicating our ideas and thoughts or our experiences or our knowledge within that committee, right? And so, so it is a little bit of a hybrid, but by appointing members on there, first off, I'll tell you something that we often have a hard time getting members that want to join committees, so we're splitting it off and having a couple. My hope would be that there are people that really want to get on culture and heritage. But, you know, so to leave those kinds of things just to volunteers, I agree with you on this, Lindsay. I think we have to have this bit of a hybrid because we just can't count on volunteers to do this kind of stuff.
Go to
Long
Councilor.
story short.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, Heather, that having council there, it is the liaison thing, it also helps, I think, keep us running efficiently as well, because there may be things that committee might want that say, well, actually, you know, we talked about that in council or whatever, and it's already in the works, or maybe it's something that is not going to be possible for a few years, or it just helps that two-way communication, right? Helps facilitate that in a more expeditious manner, right? So having at least one council member is beneficial there, so.
Thank you. I totally agree with the trouble keeping and recruiting council or committee members in the past, but I'm really hoping that with some of the changes that we're making and with the internal vision setting that we're doing, that, you know, that we can change things and that people will be buying in and finding their place and, you know, in our plethora of new committees that they will find a place for them. With the council on committees thing, and with council representation on individual committees, I actually don't know if that's a good idea, because I think that it can become skewed if you're sitting as council representation on a committee where, you know, you're not really there in a council capacity. Like, I think it's a really gray area. But I do agree that there's been a lot of just, you know, ruthlessly riding the backs of volunteers and cohorts, and I don't think that's set anybody up for long-term success either. So I think that receiving all this information, we all have like a lot of feelings about it, and we, you know, it's something that, again, we've all heard about at campaign time, but like maybe we should, as Jeff suggested earlier, just, you know, postpone our discussion a little bit and think on it, because we can keep talking for like an hour on this, and you know, it might not get resolved tonight. Like, it's definitely giving me lots to think about, even the differences with the engagement and the arts and heritage and the Roman culture, because I came in thinking we got to get rid of this if we're going to make it a staff position. But that's my thought on it.
Thank you.
I can also just say too that, like, I guess, I mean, if you have somebody who wants to do an event and they want support from the time that they go to, and it's a recreation event, but it's also, I guess, we'd have to just make that clearly defined, that's also.
Okay.
But I'm processing, and I agree with you, I think we probably need a little bit of time to process this one. Because just in these few moments of going from what in the hell are you talking about, a Colhurst Heritage Committee, to thinking, I think this might really attract some people that would be very interested in the historical component and our heritage, because you're right, it's really rich, and there's so much potential there, right? And really rolling in some of that community inclusiveness as well. Like, we might attract an entirely different group of people that would be really interested to be a part of something like this.
I think there was the original committee called Colhurst Minor Base Historical Association or Society. So, and it's not a foreign concept.
There's also the potential too that maybe the recreation component comes out of this as a whole. And then it's focused more so on the culture aspect of that, because that is something that we identified. But again, that's something that we can, if we would like to go away and think about this one, maybe we can do that. And then just have a conversation before our organizational meeting. If that works for people.
Absolutely.
Okay. I did just want to open it up, so we'll do that with this one. But if there's any other committees or ideas that you had that maybe we don't have, that you think that we need to consider establishing. I'm going to go to Councillor Ackerman, because I know he's got the list.
Sure, thank you. Just looking at combining committees, we do have an intermunicipal committee with Lethbridge County, and then we do have an intermunicipal committee. So I think there should be.
What is the difference between? Go ahead.
Well, one is our intermunicipal committee with all three, Lethbridge County and Lethbridge, and one is just with the county.
Okay.
Right?
We actually haven't, I don't think we've ever had this in intermunicipal. just regular one.
You know, we've never met.
The intent when those were set up is what you're saying, and I think we've never really fully acted on those, and so, I think having both of them combined as one might be valued, because you can carry the experiences from one committee to the next when we're meeting with another, rather than reinventing the wheel, we're carrying that knowledge and that experience forward with each municipality, right?
I think
The processes I'm talking about, not knowledge of the other municipalities.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have the same people connecting with other municipalities. It's just kind of like an organization has a communication director that does all the communication regardless of who they're talking to, right? So I think that we could probably combine those. I know we have another couple of internal committees that aren't on the list there. We have the finance committee, which is one that everyone was a member of. We have the emergency advisory committee and then the staff volunteer appreciation committee. So those are other ones we can discuss. I did look at some of the other communities.
We have we have our community engagement committee as well, right?
I don't think it was ever, we never ever
We started it.
and then the terms of reference never came to fruition.
Okay.
But looking at like some of the other communities in the area, there's steering committees, there's senior society committees, beautification committees, community engagement, historical, seniors housing, mayor's youth council, community safety, and then an environment committee. So these are all just kind of some of the ones that I saw in the area. I'm not saying necessarily that we have to add any of them, but it might be just something just to kind of bring to attention that there are ones out there like that.
Can I ask you something? So you've put some thought into this. Councillor Ackman, what would you think of sort of like a community services kind of committee that kind of looks at things like housing and community safety, policing, those kinds of things, rather than having separate boards? I mean,
What do you think about that one for a minute?
But we,
Go ahead.
and we also have the strategic alignment committee as well,
Yes, that was one.
to review the alignment with our. And then I had been talking about youth policy for forever, but I don't think it ever went anywhere. It went to policy bylaw, and never made it out. So, but I understand the others. I don't know, yeah, I guess.
I really like the idea of this, I think we've seen that safety is a big thing, whether it's rolled into something else or it's its own thing. I think that there's a big gap there, and I think that there's, I would love to see people be involved in that, whatever that looks like.
And sorry, could I just ask, like, in terms of safety, we're talking about like policing?
Yeah, I think so, right? Like, I think that part of it is like when we're, whether it's with RCMP or the proposed police, the provincial police force, I think it's, having, like when we had that meeting with Staff Sergeant Newman and having a better understanding of that, whether it's also partially, maybe it's arranging a town hall or something with, so that it's continually happening, right? That people are feeling like they're involved in this.
Yeah, no, it's fine, I just wanted to clarify,
Yeah.
just like when I hear safety, I just, I think of something else. Because obviously my job, I'm just
Like construction?
yeah, going
Okay.
downstairs or something.
Okay, no, I didn't mean that. I mean like community safety.
So it's-
No, not.
Thanks, thanks.
Council Florence.
Are we still talking about internal committees, or can I speak to some external committees too?
I think we're just on internal right now, and then we can get there.
Okay, because some of them, because it's all mixed up between the intermunicipal and what you're talking about, so there's a few things everywhere. And they're also in the wrong spots, like emergency measures, that would be, anyway, doesn't matter. So, yes, go carry on.
We will fix that. Okay, so we had a couple of different ideas. So we had at one point we had started to establish our strategic alignment committee. So just to give you some context behind this, the purpose of this committee when we first developed it was to really help us continually measure if we were actually working towards our strategic plan goals. And so that was the intention behind that committee, is so that we could look at that. We could also like make purposeful community engagement type of sessions for that to really move it forward. Is that something that should just be happening all the time, or is it worth having time set aside for a committee to really review that all the time?
Well, I'll always start with what's council's desire.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry, I'd like, the message we heard previously was, well, like, you can just do that as part of the committee of the whole. But then we also have the finance committee, was also, it's really the same thing. So in terms of like being consistent, we need I guess we need a finance committee. I think by law or something, don't we?
I don't believe it's a statute of the MGA. It's the way the council organizes itself, and that way you're meeting as finance committee to deliberate financial matters.
And we would do that once, like, for the,
So I might just throw this back in for council's consideration. The strategic plan is your plan for the term. It's what you want to accomplish. It is the work of council. Where would the best work of council be handled?
And so we thought, when we looked at this committee, I think we were having these very full agendas at the time, and we felt that there was not enough time being given to sort of that, the high level strategic thinking and the, moving that forward with community engagement. And so, but we had determined that that would be all of council that would be on that committee. And the reason why we spoke about it is so that we could actually set aside designated time and say, this is a time that we are meeting specific to this. Am I correct in that?
yes.
Right, thank you. So, I mean, I think if moving forward, if we are in charge of our agenda and we're saying that this is something that is going to be a part of every meeting that we have, unless of course it's a very heavy meeting, but if we sort of say that this is going to be a part of our agenda going forward, that we're going to have some time to say, let's take a look at this sort of piece of our strategic plan. Is this aligning, right? I mean, that might be.
Well, even if it was that quarterly, right, so that at a committee of the whole, we were able to really review, what's progressed or something like that, right, where it happens at those types of things, but we just schedule that so that there's this purpose behind it.
As well as the community engagement piece, and check in with ourselves, where are we with that? And what do we need to do with that going forward? I love that idea quarterly.
Thoughts on that from others? Does it seem like something that we could just like build a calendar on and use it within our committee of the whole structure, rather than having its own? Okay, so if we were to look at looking at the strategic plan as well as like that check-in with like our community engagement type of thing, we could just add that as some standing items? Does that work for everybody? Yeah, okay.
And if I can add then, if there is a requirement for something special or something additional, you can form an ad hoc group of council, two members of council, who can, bring in people of public, whatever the requirement is, but do it in an ad hoc sense. Because again, this is council's document. It's one of your raison d'etre of being here. So addressing it at a regular interval at a council meeting or at a committee of the whole, or a finance committee meeting is, I think, incredibly apropos and very important for you to remain focused on it, to the point that when you get to the end of the term, you can look back and say, we have accomplished this. And I know we've accomplished this because we've been tracking it all along. Many councils create a strategic plan and it just becomes a document. It hangs on a wall or it's a document that gets put on the shelf. You're a council that have created a strategic plan that I understand you're going to bring forward and let the community take a look and provide input on. It's very personal to you, it's very important to you, and if you keep it on your agenda and keep focused on it, you'll accomplish it.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back, Councilor Harkins, you did bring up one of the things that we didn't talk about is the Staff Volunteer Appreciation Event Committee. And so I'd just like to open that up for feedback on that one.
I think it's an operational thing. I think like the things that we're doing in that committee is deciding what to eat.
Color of the tablecloths.
How to color the tablecloths. And honestly, I don't think it's, it's important that the event happens. And I think there's maybe some input that could be provided as to, who the community leaders are. But the rest of it, I don't feel is a valuable use of council's time. So.
Other thoughts? Go ahead, Councillor Lawrence.
I have to agree with that. It feels very silly to be talking about, candies and stuff like that when we could be talking about bigger things. I think that one of the things that maybe we could do at the organizational meeting is set MCs so that it rotates through. So that, because that would be a part that council does. But again, I mean, even that, there's a piece of operations to it, right? Hopefully they write it for us. No, I'm just kidding. We can write our own speech.
There'll be two very different speeches.
Yes. But for the input and stuff, but yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. It's very much operational.
Would anyone disagree with that?
No.
No? Okay, so we can do away with that committee.
Madam Chair, at the risk of wading in, will I understand, and I have not met either of you of the committee, which we're supposed to have tomorrow at 1:30. I don't know if this means we're not. The value of council participation on this is reflected in the fact that it's recognition of staff who are serving the community, serving you, serving the organization, serving the community, and the volunteers in this community. And I know having, there are, from what I've seen, from what I've reviewed from the information, absolutely, there are an awful lot of things. But having participation, having some of that oversight, and we can perhaps talk about this tomorrow, certainly lends an element of credibility is the word I'm choosing, but that's not the right word at the moment. It definitely demonstrates the value that I know council feels in staff and in volunteers, and it's not just the staff, the organization itself creating a recognition for our own employees. We absolutely do. We love them and we'll celebrate them. But it's that extra step of, council is participating in this journey as well. There are people that need to be recognized for what they've contributed to the organization, to the community, serving various councils, as well as the community. So I understand, and maybe we need to just have a different look or a different perspective on that. If this council prefers not to be choosing napkin colors and tablecloth colors, I'm not the right person to do that because they won't match. But we can create a process where there is certain council input and guidance on it, because there are elements to this that are a celebration that it would be very nice to have council's leadership and participation in. So it might just be a retooling. If council is okay, I wouldn't mind having a conversation with the two members tomorrow. Maybe we could just look at what it is and reflect upon it from there, if I can just respectfully suggest that.
I had a vision as soon as I was, because I have been a part of that committee for a number of times, and you're right, it's absolutely about showing our respect. But I immediately had vision of committee of the whole, sort of having those conversations about who it is that we need to honor this year and what it might look like, and sort of setting that budget and hiring some wonderful event planners. Because there was many nights when I was escorting people home, driving them home and then going back and cleaning up and putting chairs away, thinking, I'm not sure that,
Yeah, I see this is the 24th year, I believe, that's coming up, which is amazing. It's actually wonderful.
Yeah.
So we've got an organization and a structure in place.
Yeah.
We know what it is we need to be doing. That should be wrote. It should happen. There should be a list. There should be things. It is the who do we recognize, and maybe more importantly, how do we recognize? Because not everybody necessarily needs to be recognized or wants to be recognized in the same way. And so I think having that council involvement can take a completely different role. But I would respectfully ask council just to ponder it from that perspective as well.
I think we're so close to the event, I think it's in November.
Oh, yeah, we can't change that at this point, but yeah, I mean, I suppose if you meet tomorrow and then just have some thoughts, for sure.
I like what you're saying with that. I think that like the part where I see in my view, I'm not on the committee, so I'm gonna tell you now, is that it's more that like it is about that recognition piece. It's not necessarily about the tablecloths, the centerpieces. It's about the program or the ability to recognize and taking on more of that type of role, rather than the event logistics, I guess is where I see it. And so,
No, I know, but I think that's exactly right. But that's what I think it should be too. But it hasn't been. And I think in talking about this, I have a lot of great ideas now about like the meeting tomorrow. But
find processes to be able to do all those things, because literally as committee members, we would go and order the alcohol and pick it up, and we would go and, you know, go shopping for the candy, and we would do all of those things as committee members. And you're right, and it was absolutely, there was nothing governance about what we were doing, but it was showing our respect and our care for our staff and our community volunteers, right? So it was very much a working committee. And so if we could have something in place, a process in place to ensure that all of that kind of work gets done, and, you know.
I would even suggest, as you're talking tomorrow, that rather than calling it the staff and volunteer appreciation event, it could just be like staff and volunteer appreciation. Because then that could be like, what does that look like from council?
Well, we've already renamed it to staff.
Oh, have you? Oh, yes, you did.
Staff, staff and community leaders.
There you go, yeah,
That's a wonderful name.
I like it.
We might still say that.
I just think of the event really implies logistics, but that's just my opinion. Okay, thank you for your perspective on that, I really appreciate that. Just wanted to go back to, so we've got the finance committee that is just that, we do this once a year, I think when we do budgeting, I believe, is when we have the finance committee meeting.
I think also when we're audit.
Oh, an audit, so twice a year, I guess, ish. Do we want to continue with that, or just have it as part of our, we do the work regardless, I guess, is the thing, right?
That's
Like,
what we call it.
it's just, does it need a committee name?
So to this point, you know, we've had oversight, so, you know, the mayor or the deputy mayor, whoever is signing the checks, and they're sort of going through all to ensure. And I think each audit, they've identified that because we're such a small organization, we don't have enough separation, that that's something that's important that we do. Would a finance committee take on that sort of oversight?
If you reduce it down to a couple of members or something.
Yeah,
You're talking
yeah, as opposed to a finance committee as a whole council.
And, you know, I was thinking about this in the town of Raymond, they have one of those, and it has a different perspective on looking at things and saying, where can we save money for? It's like, it's more of a constant thing than just a once a year. Those one or two or three members, they're looking at ways to save money, or, you know.
I don't know if we can do it as well as this.
No, I don't. But it's more, I guess it's more considering, you know, yes, I mean, administration's been prudent and well, it's just that this is the motion that council passed and the budget that we assigned to it, but then in looking at back in retrospect, should we have changed something? That's I guess maybe, or the ongoing practice that we have for, you know, spending X amount of dollars on training a year, should that be reevaluated? We don't have that, but I'm just, or maybe even the council remuneration policy we're talking about for a while, right? Because that could be council all of it looking at, or it could just be a couple people. So I mean, that I think, I'm just saying that could be a purpose to it if we wanted to do that, or it could be part of the committee as a whole. I don't really have either way for me, but.
Yes, go ahead.
If I may, if I can respectfully suggest for process, when we're considering new committees, let's introduce the strategic plan, look at it strategically. And if there's an element of the plan, if one of the pillars is looking at specific financial elements, we can look at creating a committee with appropriate terms of reference, with a designated lifespan to it. So that three councils from now, they still don't have this particular committee called, you know, whatever you want to call it, that is actually focused, and again, it's doing the work of the strategic plan. Council then is doing work on its plan to make sure it's being achieved. So if you're considering new committees, let's look at the strategic plan in its parts and its components, and if council desires, establish committees that are going to support the different elements of the plan.
Okay, that works for me.
And part of my work is going to be looking at your plan as well and seeing how it meshes with each of these committees as well, because anything that's going to tie into a committee should then actually become the work of the committee.
Great. Okay. Does that work? Okay, so we've gotten rid of some committees, combined some. And then if we take the advice of CAO, we'll look at the strategic plan before we create new things. That works for everybody?
Absolutely.
Okay, Councilor Torrance, there was something that you just wanted to bring up, I know about the external.
Yeah, I just, thank you. I guess just like the value in some of this committees, I know this is something we've talked about before. I guess one for me, that I just don't know if there's a lot of value in is the Old Man watershed. I just don't see a lot of value in it. And then on our externals, we have emergency measures listed. But that's an internal and it's emergency advisory, it should be below. That's a really important one though. And then I guess the one other thing I want to bring up is with the, where did it go? With the Green Acres Foundation, so we have to do a requisition, and we have to pay into a housing authority. But does it have to be Green Acres? Could we explore whether it could be a different housing authority like Covenant, where we might, be able to leverage that a little bit to actually get something built here? Whereas we know that sometimes Green Acres can be very focused on a large center like Lethbridge. Can we even explore a different housing authority? And then talk about the value around that.
Yeah, first I have to correct, I think you're under some misinformation that Green Acres would primarily focus on the city of Lethbridge. They have a really strong regional presence, so I just wanted to correct that. We receive our requisition from the province of, right? So that is part of our tax base and it goes to a management body. And so there's designated management bodies that hold contracts with the province. And those funds go to those management bodies because they have the mandate to provide housing for seniors, and in particular housing for low-income seniors, to ensure that they have housing, of course. And so we can't choose different organizations that we would give a requisition to. That's all through the Alberta government. And so so Covenant isn't an active management body at this time. Green Acres serves this region, and then there's other ones that serve different regions around us.
Thank you, Mayor Martina. And I just wanted to remind Deputy Mayor Caldwell to speak through the chair. It's just as a point of order, it's just something that I like to keep in mind. That was my question. Where is the value in that, right? Being new to this, I'm not sure. But I do know that we haven't seen a lot happening in Green Acres, and that was one thing that came up when we were campaigning, and that's why I wanted to bring it up here. Is that a possibility or is it not? If it's not, that's okay. But I do think that we owe it to our residents to be pursuing things that are productive.
Steve, could you speak to that? Is that we're kind of locked in, just for clarification?
Yes, the Deputy Mayor's correct. I think it's Section 8 of the Housing Act gives the authority to the Green Acres Foundation to requisition on property taxes. So City of Lethbridge, Colehurst, Barons, can you complete that list for me, please, Deputy Mayor? There's
Coaldale, Picture Butte,
Nobleford, yeah. So all of those municipalities on their property tax have a requisition that goes to Green Acres Foundation for that purpose, of providing housing for predominantly low-income seniors. As a contributor, we have a position on the board. And are you Deputy Mayor representative to Green Acres? Yes. And so that's our voice on that board as to where funding goes and how the funding is done. Certainly the presence of Green Acres in Lethbridge is large, as somebody who has served. But there is a contribution to other communities. And maybe it just does require more of a conversation with Green Acres saying, okay, what can we look at that's going to support or provide or create here in Colehurst? If you want to, and again, this is up to council, if you want to be actively pursuing other agencies that don't operate on that requisition format, council can certainly do that. You can look at budget initiatives and that, because there will be it'll be a different partnership, a different relationship. And it'll be out of taxation, direct taxation as opposed to, or be out of general as opposed to a direct taxation on the bills as currently exists with Green Acres.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yes, go
I just
ahead.
had one thing, I think it also comes back to like, looking at our capital priorities and saying, there was a project that was in place before the previous council that, was not successful for whatever reason. And how, we need to look at our capital priorities and see if we can bring another project forward in this somehow, right? So I think we haven't had any discussions. The presentations we had from the community representatives did indicate, we just need to partner on a project, and we've never had that topic discussed at any of our meetings or council meetings. So, right, so how we haven't appreciated that yet. So that's one thing that we should look at, I think, going forward.
I agree.
Great, well, we're at 10 to 10.
My apologies.
We had some really great conversations tonight. And if we're done with our committees, I'm just going to ask for a motion to adjourn at 9:49.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Great, thank you. Oh, all in favor? It's carried. I always forget that one. It's always that one. Perfect. I just have a question. I'll wait till that thing to show up. So last year,